Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my co-host Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
TV, we're at the end of January. We're closing in on trade deadline conversations heating up, and things are already churning. We've seen a couple of trades from your team. We now have another big time trade that we're going to talk about today. Trade season is officially underway, my boy, which means that we got a lot to talk about today.
There is a lot to talk about. By the way, like you said, we're at the end of the month. And if you've been looking at the Daily Picks Challenge, like we've been neck and neck, like every single night. Like I don't think we've like breaking this tie in like 4 days.
No, it's been bad. I think yesterday is still the same. I think we both went 2-1.
We both went 1 and 2 yesterday.
1 and 2. 1 and 2. I was gonna say it's either one or two yesterday. No one went 3-0, but
yeah. Yeah. So it's gonna go down to the wire again, as it does for every single month of the Daily NBA Picks Challenge. But we have one more week of that, so that's gonna conclude at some point. But we have a great episode for you guys today. Like you said, a trade happened. There is Championship Sunday this weekend. So we have actually a kind of edible topic. We'll get into that later. And of course, we have the draft. And of course, we got the quiz. So we're going to be getting into those as well. But before we start this episode, we do have to plug our socials. Remember to follow our individual accounts at TV on Basketball, at the Knockdown J / the Routine Jumper. Those links can be found in the description below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws pod, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. You see vlogs, you see challenges, you see clips, you get the whole scoop. You even get like random news. Like I was like all over the news this week, and I was like I had to make like 3 videos. So you have to be on the lookout for that. Those have been doing great. In terms of the YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. And if you're listening to us on any of the podcast networks, Spotify or Apple, review. Leave a like, all that good stuff. We really do appreciate all of your support. Jay, let's get into this.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. We got a unique set of topics this week.
Oh, yes, we do. And we're going to start off with just a bunch of things that happened in the NBA this week. Jay, you talked about it before the pod. I was kind of worried, like Sunday, like that we weren't going to have enough NBA news to talk about. But we've probably had one of the craziest 72 hours of the NBA this past season, and we're basically gonna give you each topic a little bit of time. Firstly, on Monday we had these 2 big men just go absolutely off on Monday night. Karl-Anthony Towns sets a Timberwolves franchise record, 62 points, 44 in the first half, and his team lost to the freaking Charlotte Hornets at the end. That was crazy. But on the same night, of course, we have to talk about freaking Joel Embiid scoring 70 points. As the 76ers win by 10 against Wembanyama and the Spurs. Just a crazy night of basketball. The big man renaissance has been going on for the last few years, and this is just a culmination of it with 2 of these guys just going absolutely off. Jay, just a crazy night from these 2 guys right here.
I mean, super insane and very contrasting games, right? You're talking about 2 really good teams playing 2 really bad teams, getting really great performances from their lead big men, but 2 completely different results. Like,
yes.
It's really unique when you look at it. Joel Embiid was just sheer dominance. It was insane. We saw Victor Wembanyama open up the game with 2 knockdown threes, and you're like, yes. Oh, this could be really entertaining. And then it went from being like Joel Embiid versus Victor Wembanyama to a lot more Joel Embiid and not much Victor Wembanyama. And not necessarily, in terms of the stat sheet, but just the fact that Joel he was getting anything and everything he wanted the other day. I think I heard Tim Bontemps on the Low Post podcast with Zach Lowe. He said, we're getting to the point where like Joel Embiid is Kevin Durant, but 100 pounds heavier. Like, he's just getting busy, bro. He's just doing whatever he wants. He's shooting over the top of guys. He's getting to the basket. That mid-range game is it's almost Dirk-esque at this point. Like, he's on a completely different kind of mission. And you could hear it when he was finished. I mean, he probably has the most serious 70-point game and picture at the end, by the way, out of all the guys who have, like, achieved such a feat. He probably looks the most disinterested in his accomplishment. And then his actual quote afterwards of almost kind of the Kobe job not finished kind of approach to it kind of further like shows us that like, yes, Joel Embiid is dominant. Yes, Joel Embiid is in a weird way the real modern day Shaq, as opposed to like how a lot of people were viewed Giannis Antetokounmpo in that way. I think Joel Embiid is more of that ilk, just in a different way in terms of his dominance, right? But he can tell, just like we all know, that this is great and all, but we haven't seen you past the second round. Like that at the end of the day is the overall narrative. Now on the opposite side, you have Karl Anthony Towns, who literally his coach made it clear, not just to him after basically benching him in the last 3 minutes of the game, but also through the media, that he was stat hunting. And they lost. So it cost them, right? So it's two totally different ways of viewing big time performances in two totally different games. But we all know Joel Embiid's performance was obviously the most impressive of the two.
Yeah, 70 points, just absolutely crazy. And people don't realize this, but this is like the first time this entire season he's eclipsed 30 field goal attempts, and he attempted like 40 in that night. Like it was just pure domination from the inside. And shout out to Wemby too. He had like a 30.10 rebound game or something like that. Along those lines. But Embiid was just sunning him the whole game, completely dominating the entire game. And to see another 70-point performance, by the way, within the last 13 months, this is our third 70-point performance within the last 13 months, which is absolutely insane as well. Great performance from him. Karl Anthony Towns, man, this man was making the Hornets announcers cry in the first half, like just the way he was dominating the game. And then he kind of ruined it at the end for them. 2 for 10 in the fourth quarter. Should he have got fouled in the last possession? Probably, but still, he kind of like shot him out of it. And the Charlotte Hornets, man, great win. We're gonna talk about them very, very shortly once again, but they were able to pull out that win. Big shot from Brandon Miller at the end of the game. But yeah, just two great performances, and just continues on the renaissance, the revival of the big man. Jay, 10 years ago we had DeAndre Jordan making All NBA first teams, and now we have like, who are you going to put at the center? We have Jokic. We have Embiid. Now we have Towns in the mix. We have Rudy Gobert. Like, this is like, the big men is like being like well and truly like the best players in the league again. And it's nice to see. It's not the dominating big men as well. These guys are like extremely skilled. It's like, it's kind of scary how much they play like guards. But yeah, just a crazy good performance from both these guys. But it was great. And then the fact that it happened the same night where I decided to watch Memphis versus Toronto live, and it was probably one of the worst games of the year. All right, moving on to some more notable news. I mean, those are some pretty big news. But like Jay said off the top, another trade happened. The Miami Heat get their scoring guard, but it turned out to be Terry Rozier as they trade away Kyle Lowry in a 2027 lottery protected pick. By the way, if that pick doesn't convey that year, it becomes a 2028 unprotected pick. So still very valuable pick from the Miami Heat. And they get in return Terry Rozier. It's not Bradley Beal, it's not Damian Lillard, it's not Donovan Mitchell, but he's still a pretty good scorer, averaging 23 points a game this year. Jay, do you think the Miami Heat got a good deal in getting Terry Rozier?
I think the best way to view it is that the Miami Heat clearly needed another playmaker. That was understood. Like, when you look at what they have, I like Bam Adebayo. Obviously, he's doing a lot better on both sides of the ball than we are used to, especially on the offensive end. We already know that he's an All-NBA caliber defender, but how he's been able to make up on the offensive end with Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero and guys either being out of the lineup or just simply not playing up to snuff, he is developed in a real way. But we understand that there's two things that are for certain. One, if they get to the playoffs, they're going to be dangerous. And for two, Tyler Hero is best coming off the bench. This, in a way, solves both of those problems, because Terry Rozier, for one, is going to be a very valuable player during the regular season. We've seen this guy average 20 points per game. We've seen this guy have big playoff moments as a member of the Boston Celtics once upon a time, right? So we know that he's going to be valuable both in the regular season and in the postseason. This also bumps down the pecking order where this allows the Heat to potentially bring Tyler Hero off the bench in good graces, understanding that in reality, TV, nobody wants to really talk about it, but this team is not necessarily better off without Tyler Hero, but they're pretty good at being good when he's not on the floor. This is something that's been relatively consistent going back to about a year or two ago, where it seems like every single time that Tyler Hero was out for significant injury, they play really well. They don't miss a beat. If anything, they almost play better sometimes when he's not on the floor. When he comes off the bench as a spark plug for them, there's a different dynamic to them. Like for example, Duncan Robinson is having a really good year this year, under the radar, flying under the radar, having a good year. Terry Rozier adds something to them that they definitely needed to get, but I feel like there's another trade coming. Like the secret part of this entire trade is that it's cost cutting. I think they were supposed to owe like $27 million towards the luxury tax or something going into next season. And with this trade exchange, sending Kyle Lowry out, obviously the way their money and stuff is set up, now it cuts down to about $13 million into the tax. That's the kind of cap gymnastics we're used to with the Miami Heat. But at the same time, I feel like if they understand the window that they're currently in with Jimmy Butler, this can't be the last thing they do. So does that mean Tyler Hero goes back up on the block? Probably. But at the same time, it'll just be interesting to see what they do. Whether they pull the trigger on moving Tyler Hero or not, it'll be interesting to see what they do. But Terry Rozier is a very good acquisition. I just think he's the first domino to something else.
Interesting. And in terms of like the starting lineup change, firstly, I do like to trade for the Miami Heat. They were, like I mentioned, they were trying to go for like stars like year in and year out. And we've been kind of clowning Pat Riley the last couple of years for kind of missing out on these stars because this is usually the Miami Heat way. They usually get stuff done, but they haven't been getting it done the last few years. Mm-hmm. But they ended up getting Terry Rozier. I think it's a good deal, especially because Kyle Lowry has not looked good this year, really. And probably the last like 5 to 10 games has been one of the worst stretches of his career. He was averaging like 2 points per game on like 16% shooting from the field, and he hasn't hit a 3 in like 6 or 7 games. So it's been a rough time for Kyle Lowry. But getting Terry Rozier here, I don't know if this means he's actually the automatic starter. I don't know that for sure. I think it's still going to be a thing between him and Tyler Hero. I mean, Tyler Hero has been there longer. He probably like just knows the system better. But this gives them another option. So if Tyler Hero is not really giving them what they need at the end of games, you can have Terry Rozier. You still have Bam. You still have Jimmy. All I know is that they just needed some perimeter scoring production, and they got that in Terry Rozier. That fixes their problem immediately. This playmaking aspect, I'm not sure about, but I do like this trade for the Miami Heat, and it didn't have to take much. It was a lot of protected pick, but I do think they got a good guy in Terry Rozier there that is going to help them long term. And we've seen how this guy plays in the playoffs. Mind you, remember those Boston years, man. The first time he made it to the conference finals with, what was it, a rookie Jason Tatum, was it? Mm-hmm. Like, Terry Rozier was absolutely that guy when he was, like, freaking taking care of business against Eric Bledsoe and then going all the way to the conference finals and all that. So we know that Scary Terry is a playoff performer. Let's just hope that this helps out the Miami Heat, especially if they want to have another chance to go into the NBA Finals. In terms of the Charlotte Hornets, they got a first-round pick. And that pick could be valuable, especially because we don't know what Miami looks like in a couple of years. Kyle Lowry's probably not going to be with them. I don't know where he ends up, but I hope he ends up on a contender which could possibly use him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to how Miami continues to progress. I think you have a good point about whether or not Terry Rozier just is able to start right out the way. Terry Rozier feels like he is a Heat guy to a certain extent, which I also just feel like kind of like helps seamlessly with this. Again, the playmaking aspect of Terry Rozier is the number one thing that brings him in as an asset off the bounce. I don't think that he helps exactly where they need help. I feel like they needed point guard help more than they necessarily needed it from the shooting guard position. But again, that's why I feel like something else is set to come. Nonetheless, I feel like you can look at this as did the Miami Heat get better through this acquisition? I think the answer is yes. How much? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, 100%. I'm excited to see him. He's going to be, as of the recording of this video, they're facing Miami Heat, the Memphis Grizzlies tonight, and he is debuting. So we get to see Terry Rozier in Miami Heat action very soon. Last thing before we move on, do you see any place for Kyle Lowry? I mean, they said they're going to try to find him a contender. Is there like, you don't even have to go too deep into it. Do you think there's a place I can use him?
He is a buyout guy waiting to happen. I feel like the only thing is that the second apron teams are not going to be on the list for him. So it's going to be tricky to see. At least I'm not sure, because I don't think he's owed a ton of money. He could be like an interesting. He could be an interesting guy if he's able to make like the waiver wire, bro. Like he could be a really interesting pickup for like the Phoenix Suns or like a Los Angeles Lakers team. If they have the scratch to go make that play. I don't know if they have the bread, but let's be real, bro. Either way, no matter, I mean, Kyle Lowry's going to end up in a quote unquote winning situation because I think that a team that's looking to make a real push is going to like throw a flyer at Kyle if they can afford it. But at the end of the day, if the price is too steep, we've seen how Kyle's been this year. He's been all right, but it ain't been great. You know what I mean? So the asking price more than anything is going to determine whether or not he's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak.
100%. I will give you two options in terms of a buy market. If he does get bought out, it's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. I feel like that is just a prototypical Nick Nurse guy. He would want to have Kyle Lowry on the team. Plus, he's a hometown dude. He's from Philly, so it'll be great to see him back in his hometown. But a sneaky team that could trade for him potentially, especially because they have a pretty big contract guy on their team, the New York Knicks. You know, they could trade the Evan Fournier contract, make something work there. And then maybe do something and get Kyle Lowry. I mean, they do need some point guard help. I mean, Jalen Brunson's obviously their starter, but in terms of a backup point guard, are you really going to trust Miles McBride, Malachi Flynn, like in a deep playoff run? It's good to have, those championship caliber players, the guys who've been there, done that. And I think Kyle Lowry could potentially be that guy there. So if there's someone to make a trade and they have the Evan Fournier contract to make it work, I think the Knicks can maybe take a shot at it.
Great point. I think that the Knicks one is really interesting because we had a conversation about Malcolm Brogdon with them, right? But I think that Kyle Lowry is a little bit more fit for what it is that they can actually afford right now to be able to address that backup point guard position without having to really move off of a whole lot. Because the other thing is, I don't think it's going to be very hard to finesse Charlotte out of anything. And I'm not saying you necessarily have to finesse Charlotte out of Kyle Lowry. This is a buy low version of Kyle Lowry for sure. So I don't think it's going to take very much to get off of Kyle. But I think that's what makes it very easy for a team like Philadelphia, for example, or like the New York Knicks, who kind of need to just get a little bit better around the edges to be able to make a small move that should be able to have long-term ripple effect in terms of their postseason success this year. Those are two really good teams. I like the Philly connection aspect of it for the Sixers, and I also like the backup point guard fit if we're talking about the Knicks. Either one going after him is going to work in a really good way. I wonder who's going to pull, and I wonder how much Kyle Lowry is really worth. Like, can you still get a first-round pick out of Kyle Lowry? I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, do you remember last year when Jay Crowder got traded for like 4 second-round picks?
True.
I feel like that. I feel
anything's
like
possible, then, I guess.
So I feel like that's something like what Kyle Lowry could get in return. And again, they have to have a 40 contract to get close to making it work. You know what? Throw Malachi Flynn in there too. Why the hell not? So let's see what happens. But yeah, let us know down below what you guys think. Who won the Terry Rozier trade? Do you think the Miami Heat get a lot better? Do you think it's gonna help them make a deeper playoff run? Let us know down below. But man, the news just keeps coming in the NBA because in this shocking turn of events, the Milwaukee Bucks they fired Adrian Griffin after 43 games in which they went 30-13. They have the third best record in the league, and they fire him. And to make it even more crazier, Doc Rivers got hired today. This guy keeps getting jobs left, right, and center. This guy cannot leave the NBA head coaching position. He gets hired. We're probably going to get into like some other stuff, which is crazy about this whole story. But Jay, your quick thoughts on Adrian Griffin getting fired not just over halfway through the season and Doc Rivers being back on the freaking bench.
Man, first of all, Doc Rivers, like you said beforehand, can't seem to find his way out of these conversations. Shout out to him though. If he wants to keep coaching, I mean, it's definitely something he's good at. Don't get me wrong. Once you get to the postseason, things get a little tricky when it comes to Doc. But overall, Doc is really good at coaching up teams that are built well, have a foundation to them, have a certain established culture to a certain degree. Doc Rivers is a very well lauded coach. I don't want to disrespect that, right? I think the biggest thing for me besides how he actually got the job. We'll get into that in a little while because the way in which he actually got the job is like low key petty and low key insane. But I think the main thing that I worry, if I'm a Milwaukee Bucks fan, is Doc Rivers has this weird thing about coaching teams with actual pressure, right? Like we know that Doc Rivers, he thrives best when his team kind of falls under the radar, low key, right? Like if we remember that one year with Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, right? That squad with Tobias Harris as the leading scorer, Danilo Gallinari, right? We realized that kind of version of the LA Clippers was probably the best time for Doc Rivers as a coach, right? Because he was able to take a team that many kind of didn't view much, in a weird way, the Islands of Misfit Toys kind of thing that they got going on in Utah. That was what was going on with the LA Clippers at the time. And they were able to thrive. And that was a team that took the OP Golden State Warriors to 6 games and viewed themselves as needing one more guy to put them over the top. And they end up flipping the whole script and getting 2 the year later because they end up getting Kawhi Leonard and Paul George not too far behind. Obviously, he no longer was in the job anymore by that point. But he just thrives in environments where the stakes are not nearly as high and he's able to get the best out of the guys on the floor. That's a double-edged sword because for a team like Milwaukee, they have high expectations. Their team is old. TV, we've joked about this beforehand. Their team is mad old. Damian Lillard is on a clock and obviously has his own version of pressure as a guy who has not won a championship yet. Like the window with Giannis, though he did although he did sign the extension, there's always you gotta wonder when it comes to Giannis, right? When things start getting tricky about their championship window, Giannis starts making it known how he feels, right? These are all things that make the Milwaukee timeline not as sweet of a situation as some would view from the outside, saying, dang, I got 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA on the same team. I'm about to go get busy and go win me a ring. It's not that straightforward. So I worry about a guy like Doc Rivers specifically for this job because he's the kind of guy that a setup like this almost seems too good to be true, and that's exactly how he might jack it up.
Yeah. I mean, this guy is really living off this one championship with the freaking Boston Celtics because
bro. Dang.
I'm sorry, but the Bucks have such high aspirations. And knowing how things went down with the 76ers, with the LA Clippers, with the Orlando Magic like 20 years ago, like, yes, he's able to put out good regular season teams on a season-to-season basis. We do not doubt that with Doc Rivers. He has them in position in top 10 offense, top 10 defense, which I think is a big reason why they brought him in, is because he knows how to coach a defense. Adrian Griffin had this team 21st in the league, since 2024 started, they were the 28th worst defense in basketball, bottom 3 in basketball. So
talking about having a DPOY candidate on the roster too, just a year ago, and now they're
exactly. So I see what they're doing here with Doc, but with the expectations that the Milwaukee Bucks have, I just don't think that Doc Rivers is going to be the coach for them, because when it comes to the playoffs, and players that played for him before know about this, they've said this. We had many players go on record and saying this guy doesn't make adjustments when things get tough. You know what he's gonna go to in the playoffs? Every single position. Giannis, Lillard, pick and roll. Giannis, Lillard, pick and roll. Every single possession. And then people are going to be like, how are they losing? They're running the pick and roll so much. Because that's the only thing they'll do, because Doc won't change things in the playoffs. He won't change from his mentality. We've seen coaches kind of change their system, a la Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, to fit with the times. And I feel like Doc Rivers hasn't done that consistently. So I think with the Milwaukee Bucks, yes, this is going to get their defense better, which needs to be improved a lot. But I just think that when it comes to playoff time, we know what Doc Rivers has been these last 15 years. I don't think that's going to change, because he's basically in the same position as he was with the Clippers and then with the 76ers the last couple of years.
I feel you. I feel you. I mean, TV, I guess the real question comes down to like who, I mean, yes, there's a couple of guys that come to mind. Like Kenny Atkinson is still out there. That was a guy who was actually like on the coaching roster at the beginning of the year. And I mean, there was some stuff that was going on early in the season where I actually think Adrian Griffin and he had a little bit of a spat. It was one of those things where then eventually he stepped away. Oh no, that's Terry Stotts. Terry Stotts. Excuse me. Yeah. So Kenny Atkinson is an interesting guy for player development standpoint. Terry Stotts is the other guy, who was actually already on the roster. He was kind of the connector piece for Damian Lillard early on, and that was discussed like within the first week or two of him like being a part of this coaching group, was that like he would be somebody that like would be a familiar face for Dame as he gets himself acclimated. I also think that like the messed up part about all of this is that Adrian Griffin came in. It's not exactly like the David Blatt thing, because a lot of people could try to compare it to that. From what I've heard, it's not exactly like the David Blatt thing, but I understand some of the parallels. Like one of the main things is he came in as a coach that was looking at one circumstance, and things completely changed once Damian Lillard was traded there. Now, obviously, they're always going to be a team that's going to be like in championship contention. That's probably the biggest difference between he and David Blatt. David Blatt was looking at a rebuild, and then LeBron James showed up, and you throw that right out the window. This was more of you're looking at a team looking to go win a championship, and now they just added another personality to the pot that is like all-star level. So we're talking about managing personalities in a way that goes deeper than just keeping Giannis happy, right? So, like, how many other people do you think fit in this situation, considering the fact that like he was in the building? He was in the building before he got hired.
It's weird because from all accounts, this was a Giannis approved hiring. Like this was something like exactly. Giannis went to bat for him. He's the one who made the final stamp on this. And from all reports now, he's the one who kicked him out the door. So because he lost faith in his system or whatever it was. So I think more than anything, I'm not going to say that this is just completely on Giannis, but you have to put some blame to him on this, because he's shown over the last couple of years he's flexing that superstar muscle. Guys, I want to be a Milwaukee Buck forever, but you have to show me that you want to win. Sure, let's trade Damian Lillard. Guys, this Mike Budenholzer stuff isn't working. Okay, what coach do you want? You want Nick Nurse? He's a championship coach. He beat you in 2019. No, I don't like Nick Nurse. I don't like his philosophy. Let's bring in one of Nick Nurse's proteges and Adrian Griffin. He should be the one to get the opportunity. And he messed up. He messed up. So now he gets out the door. Doc Rivers comes in, and I think like Adrian Griffin is already like some people say, oh, this is a great opportunity. You got a great team to coach the first year. It's hard when you have a team with pressure. And David Blatt knew that. And the thing about David Blatt is like, at least he had a year before that. Like he had like a year and a half before he got fired by the Cavs. Adrian Griffin had 43 games. So it was hard pressure, and you could tell that this Bucks team / Giannis is cutthroat with this stuff. 30-13, not good enough. Giannis has been complaining about the defense for the last few months, and nothing has really changed. Honestly, it's gotten worse. And now this is the position they're at right now. I'm honestly I'm just surprised that they did this now. The fact that they did this mid-season and not like let them at least get a playoff run with this team is crazy to me. But they felt like they fell under pressure from Giannis, from like all these talks about the system and everything. Bobby Portis back in October said something about this as well. So I guess the Bucks are like, look, whatever keep Giannis happy, we'll do it, even if we have to bring in the consultant of one, Mr. Griffin from December, and you can go into that, but we'll even do that to make him happy.
That's the crazy part. So news came out that kind of like alongside his little ESPN gig, Doc Rivers was actually a consultant for Adrian Griffin and the Milwaukee Bucks, kind of like almost like a side mission, right? And that's the part that makes this the most interesting, because it literally, I think they said that the general manager of the team, after the announcement was made that they were letting go of Adrian Griffin, he said he would not be addressing the media until like 6 p.m. Central Time today, which was like earlier this afternoon for us. And when he addressed the media, which already sounded a little bit odd, right? You fire your coach and then you tell me that you're not going to talk to the media for 24 to 20, I think it was like exactly 26 hours or something like that. It's already a weird circumstance, but it almost in a way was the indicator that's like, we have a guy in mind. we have a guy in mind. And here we are 24 hours later, the guy that's playing Mr. Consultant also was the guy first up to bat to get the job, hired within a day. Man, it was an inside job like nothing I've never seen before, man. And they say your homie ain't always your homie, TV. And I'm not going to say Doc Rivers had it out for Adrian Griffin, but you clearly could see that Doc Rivers has had this happen before, actually, to himself. Remember, Doc Rivers, as a member of the LA Clippers, had a pretty well-stacked staff behind him, both with the Clippers and when he was with Philly, right?
Yeah.
And had guys that were like legitimate NBA like heads, whether it was former players or like very interesting like assistant coaches hanging around in the background, kind of with his job always laying in jeopardy, having those quote unquote consultants and guys hanging in the background. It sounded like Doc Rivers was just trying to get a piece of the energy. And he's in a really good spot now, maybe not through the best means, but I think the main thing is just like, this is what I really want to ask you, TV, because look, Doc Rivers, we can't go X's and O's with Doc Rivers. I'm not even going to try that.
Yeah.
But this is the question I do want to ask you. What do you think would be the biggest difference if they just kept Bud?
Look, we saw this with Nick Nurse. We've seen this with Bud. But after you win a championship, you have a few years grace. And if you're not able to get back into that sort of form, your time just like end up expiring over there. And I think Bud's kind of reached that point. I don't think there was much that Bud could do. Bud just made like fumbled the playoffs last year when they lost to the Miami Heat, and that was basically his death sentence. It was just like, I think it was just time to move on from Bud. They made a mistake going with Adrian Griffin, but now they have a well-proven coach who was able to just produce winning records year in and year out with whatever team he was given on the Clippers, 76ers, Magic. And it's kind of feels like the right sort of step that they had to make in terms of like what to replace Mike Budenholzer with. It was already weird enough they went with a rookie coach, someone who hasn't been a head coach before. But this was the step that felt like need to be made. That's why a lot of people had them go with Nick Nurse, like we connected to Nick Nurse a lot during the offseason as well, which didn't happen. So yeah, I mean, it just felt like the logical next step if they moved on from Bud. It just happened 6 months later.
I mean, the way I view it is I think that if they just kept Mike Budenholzer and they still acquired Damian Lillard, I think they're in a better spot. Like, think about it. Even from a defensive standpoint, they pretty much were letting Adrian Griffin know, look, we've played defense this way for a long time. You're trying to bring Brook Lopez away from the basket. Look, we've thrived with him being a big-time shot blocker and rim defender. We've operated within this way for that long. It's basically them saying, we operate defensively from the school of Mike Budenholzer. Look, I understand you're trying to implement this Raptors-based defensive scheme that you're coming from, but this is what we've built our foundation of for the last 3 to 4 years in terms of building an elite defense. This works better, right? And that's where a lot of the disconnect came from, honestly. Probably was more from their lack of defensive success than it was what they've been able to do offensively. Yeah. Now, the offense has been clunky. The offense has not had enough Damian Lillard pick and rolls in it. But I think that the fact that, like you mentioned beforehand, they're so low defensively. When we're talking about having Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez as your two interior defenders, we understand the rest is bad. We get it. We understand it's rough. Damian Lillard, not a top-level defender. Malik Beasley, not a top-level defender. Bobby Portis, not a top-level. Like, we understand that the makeup outside of Giannis and Brook Lopez is not astounding. But they should not be this bad defensively. But you can understand that it's more of a philosophical disconnect than it is necessarily a productivity disconnect. They're 30-13, right? Yes, so it comes down to the idea of what they believe will be able to give them long-term success. that's the reason why the trigger was ever pulled in the first place. I feel like if you're already coming from the school of the Mike Budenholzer established situation they had, if you give me Mike, I don't know, man. It's just weird. If you give me Mike and you add Damian Lillard, I feel like you're in good grace. Like,
probably
that's how I look at it. I don't know. Maybe Doc is a better coach in this situation. We will have to see. But to me, I feel like if you run this back and you still have Mike Budenholzer and you just bring in Dame as you did before, I think circumstances are different.
It could be. I'm not doubting that. I just think that that after that loss to the Miami Heat, he lost the locker room. And no matter what the case is, once you lose the locker room, it's hard to get it back. And the writing was on the wall. Giannis saw the writing on the wall. It was just time to move on. Yeah. So I just think that no matter what would have happened, yes, they would have had Damian Lillard. But if they went the same coach and they were doing the same messages and it wasn't leading to anything more than what was happening the last, 2 years, and it wasn't going to change anything. So I just think they needed a different voice in the locker room. The first voice didn't work. Now let's see if voice number 2 is able to change things over there in Milwaukee. Right. Let us know down below what you guys think. Was it premature to let go of Adrian Griffin? Do you think that Doc Rivers was the right hire? Let us know down below. One more quick news before we move on to the next topic. There was a protest that was brought up from a couple of days ago. The Blazers are complaining about a play that happened in the last 15 seconds of the game versus the Thunder, in which Chauncey Billups was ejected by getting 2 technical fouls because he tried calling a timeout when Malcolm Brogdon picked up his dribble. And they tried calling a timeout. The refs weren't listening, led to a double dribble, then led to 2 technical fouls, which the Thunder ended up splitting, but led to a Jalen Williams game winner. And now they think the refs didn't give him a fair chance, and now there's a protest happening. Jay, quick thoughts on this?
This is insane. DV, I know we talked about this off pod because I was still just trying to wrap my head around the actual act itself. I don't think you get to make complaints. Don't get me wrong. I understand the call was egregious, right? I guess the missed call of catching the timeout. But here's the thing. The reason you even needed to take the timeout in the first place was to bail Malcolm Brogdon out of a double dribble because he tried to get a phantom call in the closing seconds of a game. He tried to get contact that wasn't there, tried to establish in a way where he thought he was going to get the call, did not, and ended up getting the double dribble call before the timeout was recognized as a part of it. I don't think that you now position yourself to be able to protest a loss in a situation where, yes, although the call was missed, this is a situation where it was a bailout for a player trying to do something in the final moments of a game that is typically unconventional. Yeah. And that's where I see this as being kind of silly. And then when you explain the logistics behind how they would even go about this if everything did get upheld, that's where I make this whole thing just this is where I really don't why it's even worth it, specifically for the Portland Trailblazers, who are not playing for anything besides player development.
Yeah, so this is what, by the way, this hasn't happened in 17 years, or 16 years. But if this were to be upheld, this is the situation that happened back then. So the Miami Heat lost the game to the Atlanta Hawks on December 19th, 2007. And there was some missed calls in the late in that game, which led to a loss, 117-111. And they held a protest for this game. The league looked at it, David Stern looked at it, and said, yes, you know what, they're right. So you know what happens? Next time they play the Hawks, before the game starts, they're going to replay the final 52 seconds of that overtime game. And you know what happened in that game? Nothing. No one scored. 114-111 went to the Atlanta Hawks. Mind you, this season, in the first game, Shaq was a member of the Miami Heat. He gets traded in February, and he's not even a part of this game now when they have to replay it, which is absolutely hilarious to me. So that's what happened 16 years ago. Is this going to happen probably now? And you're going to have to figure this out? No, it's probably not going to happen. But this is what could possibly – this is what would happen if it were to be upheld.
I mean, TV just explained it to you all, and I still don't understand. I guess I do understand, but I think it makes it even more pointless if you understand the circumstances and how it could potentially not impact a single thing. It just sounds like a waste of time. And again, I go back to specifically the Portland Trailblazers. What purpose does this serve? Even if you are able to pull off the miraculous win by replaying that final moments, like that almost feels more detrimental than beneficial for this team.
100%. But yeah, that's what's gonna happen. And let's see if there's anything changes. There's been some protests in these last few years, but none of them have led to anything. And I'm assuming this is what's gonna happen with this one as well. Let us know your thoughts down below. I honestly think they missed the call badly. They put themselves in a bad position. But in terms of the timeout, yes, the refs were blind. And we can have a whole conversation about the refs and probably a later video, because the refs this year have been doo-doo. Let us know down below what you guys think. Let us know about this whole situation down below. Jay, moving on to the next topic. And I know we're typically an NBA podcast, and we're still going to be talking NBA. But championship weekend is happening, where the conference championships in both the AFC and the NFC and the NFL will be happening. We have the Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens, and you have the Detroit Lions for the first time in 30-something years making it to the conference championship versus the 49ers. And I decided to make a little topic surrounding these teams and some of the players on those teams. So we're going to go through each of the teams and their quarterbacks, and we're going to discuss their NBA equivalents. You can go past, present, current. You can go past, present, whatever you want to do. We're going to compare the NFL teams to teams either current or in the past, and the NBA, and we're going to compare the quarterbacks to any NBA player that you so choose. So we're going to do a combination. So if we go Kansas City Chiefs, we're going to go Patrick Mahomes next, and we're going to do that for the rest of the teams. Okay. All right. So the first team we're looking at, the Kansas City Chiefs. Jay, what is their NBA equivalent?
So the Kansas City Chiefs NBA equivalent for this season to me is the Los Angeles Lakers. So the philosophy that I looked at for this comparison was, we know who the top two stars are, but the water gets a little murky after that. Like when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs, right? This is what we understand. Patrick Mahomes is that guy. Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the NBA, and obviously the second half of the dynamic duo. Mm-hmm. And they have an elite defense, right? But besides those two top guys at the top, we kind of just we trust in that duo to do what it is that they need to do, along with the elite defense, to get them where they are. But it's the duo itself that makes us believe that they are so much better than they might actually be. Like for example, Patrick Mahomes is not having an elite caliber season this year by his standards.
Yeah.
But we believe in him so much that in a matchup against Lamar Jackson, for example, who might win the MVP this year, we believe more in Patrick Mahomes because we've seen it over the course of the last couple of years. We've seen him make multiple AFC championship games. We've seen him in the Super Bowl multiple times. The Lakers are so similar to this because, well, the defense is not nearly as good, but they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And what do we do every single year? As long as you tell me that you have LeBron James on your team, right? And then to an extent, Anthony Davis gets connected to this because we say if they have a top 5 or a top 10 or a top 15 duo in basketball, you just have to believe that if LeBron James is on the roster, they always have a chance to win a championship. We are in the same territory when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. Like, despite the fact that, and I'm not saying that the Chiefs are bad by any means, but I think that our belief system, when you look at them versus the Ravens going into this AFC championship game, is we believe that Patrick Mahomes is going to do Patrick Mahomes things, and that's why they might make the Super Bowl. Despite the fact that everything on paper tells you the Baltimore Ravens are on one this year, and they really look like the team that should be favored. The same thing goes for the Lakers. The Lakers are the team that we always feel like they're not good enough, but then we look at the top guy and we say, but as long as they've got that dude, they're always in the mix. So that's the team that I compared them to.
I like it. I absolutely like that choice there, and the reasoning is like great behind it as well. LeBron to Patrick Mahomes. That's gonna make a lot of sense. The only difference is Patrick Mahomes is still like under 30 years old. LeBron has been doing this for
I'll get to Patrick Mahomes later, but this is just kind of like, I thought their team dynamic is just interesting because know the two guys and the rest is kind of just like a key theme with the Lakers this year, and the Chiefs kind of are falling into that to an extent as well.
100%. I think like we talked about this beforehand. Jay went with a lot of current teams here. I actually like went with specific versions of teams like over like recent NBA history to kind of make their comparisons with that. So my comparison for this Kansas City Chiefs were the title-winning 2022 championship Golden State Warriors. And the reason I look at that is that when you look at this Chiefs team, and if you think of the best Chiefs team in their prime, they still had Tyreek Hill. They had their elite defense, even though you had to let some guys go because they ended up getting paid. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So this 2022 Warriors team, they weren't considered really title contenders, but they finally like put things together in the playoffs because they got Klay Thompson back. You got a good version of Draymond Green, and like just role players you wouldn't expect, just are producing for you. Whether that is Isaiah Pacheco, whether that's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was pretty good in that LA Rams game. Like this Chiefs team, they're always going to be led by Steph Curry, aka Patrick Mahomes, aka Steph Curry. Other way around, I mean. But the other guys, like, you're going to have like an older Travis Kelce, or you can put that to Klay Thompson. And then the other guys, it's kind of doing their part. You have their defensive anchor, Chris Jones for the Kansas City Chiefs, Draymond Green for the Golden State Warriors. It just feels like that, and it feels not really a swan song, but you know that with a lot of these Chiefs players not named Patrick Mahomes, they're getting to that like next part of their careers where it's like how many more years do they have left in the tank to be like new contenders, and that's what the Chiefs are trying to deal with right now. If they end up winning this, it feels like very much like a 2022 Warriors run.
I think that's a really great comparison, specifically the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson comparison to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, built around then saying like those are the two guys that you look to for this team. We know that again, the similar thing comes up. If we have a Steph Curry on our team, we feel that we are championship caliber and we can be able to push on the defensive end. Well, guess what? The Chiefs have an elite quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and they have a big-time defense. That 22 roster for the Golden State Warriors had Steph Curry and an elite defense with Andrew Wiggins looking like the best two-way forward in the NBA for a little stretch. During the postseason, I think I brought this up as one of the first episodes we had on our podcast. Like, is Andrew Wiggins arguably like the best two-way forward in the NBA in terms of productivity with the way he played that season, specifically in the postseason? That was the conversation we were having, right? So we're talking about Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green still at, not necessarily the peak of his powers, but still relatively well and still backpacking the defense in a way, or quarterbacking the defense in a way. And then Kevon Looney, right? Like that team had big time defense, Steph Curry, and a reliable Klay Thompson. This Chiefs team has a big time defense, Patrick Mahomes, and a reliable Travis Kelce. I like the comparison. I like it's again, the contrast is going to be really interesting throughout this episode because you went more past and I went more present. So it's going to be interesting to see how we go about this. But I almost like your comparison more just because the 1-to-1 fits almost to a T, which might be TV inadvertently telling you he got the Chiefs winning the championship.
I don't know about that. We're not that type of podcast. But yeah, that was my comparison. Okay, moving on to their opponents, and then now we're gonna move on to Patrick Mahomes. Jay, who is your NBA comparison to Patrick Mahomes? You can go his career, him right now, wherever you want to go.
So again, I went all for this season, this year, like both in the NBA and in the NFL in terms of how I viewed it. So for Patrick Mahomes, I went Kawhi Leonard, and this is kind of weird, but hear me out. Silent assassin, haven't heard from a lot this season. Patrick Mahomes, always known for dynamic plays, gets the job done, finds a way to put his team over the top. But we haven't heard a lot about Pat Mahomes this year. Like, he hasn't been brought up in the MVP conversation much, right? We had Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott. Christian McCaffrey was getting convos earlier in the year about being a real MVP candidate, remember? Yeah. So these are all things that come into play. So he had a quiet season by his standards this year, but like I said, the way I put it is silent assassin, haven't heard a lot about haven't heard a lot about or from this season, but gets the job done and always reminds us that his team is championship caliber when he's on the floor. That's Kawhi Leonard to a T. Like when Kawhi is on the floor, he's not going to be a guy that draws a lot of attention to himself. But TV, we joke about it. We've joked about it all season. He's been on the floor healthy. He's been consistent, and it's made us feel a lot better about this LA Clippers team. Like he just gives us a new energy when it comes to how you feel about the LA Clippers chances going into the postseason, because he's been here, he's been productive. Rocky start to the season, still coming off of injury, but has really picked it up. And the group with him, James Harden, Paul George, Russell Westbrook, and the rest of this roster has really made it work in a way that I feel like they're going to go on a run. And it's not going to be until late in the playoffs that we really start giving Kawhi Leonard his flowers.
I like that choice. For myself, I'm comparing Patrick Mahomes to LeBron James, and just on the pure basis that no matter what happens, no matter if they're the 7th seed, if they're a wild card team, it doesn't matter. Y'all have a chance when you have Patrick Mahomes. Same thing with the Lakers. Same thing with like every single team LeBron has been on. As long as you have LeBron, you've got a chance.
Yeah,
and that's what's happening. Especially this Mahomes run is reminding me of like that Eastern Conference run LeBron had in like 2010 to 2018. It doesn't matter what happens in the regular season. They might be playing lower tiers, lower than their standards, because they just don't care about the regular season as much. But when it comes to playoff time and when you have the ball in his hands at the end of the game, it doesn't matter. You guys still have a chance. So I'm gonna make my comparison there. Patrick Mahomes to LeBron James. I think it's just like plain and simple. We've gone to that point with Mahomes.
Yeah, no, true. I mean, we kind of crossed that bridge when I talked about the Lakers to an extent. So to me, it all makes sense, because it's just at the end of the day, whether it's Steph Curry when you made the association with the 22 team or LeBron James, it's just one of those ideals where it's like, if you have that guy, you're gonna be all right. Like we have some belief that you can make a run, whether the rest of the team is up to snuff. That's let go and let God. Yeah. But if you have this guy, you're going to be in good graces to a certain extent. I completely agree.
100%. All right. Now we're going to move on to their opponents, Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson himself. We're going to start with the Ravens. Jay, who's your NBA comparison for the Ravens?
So my NBA comparison for the Ravens is the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, let's break it down. Dynamic athlete to lead the team in a really special way. And now I don't want to say an inconsistent way with the way that most championship teams are led, but hyper athletic guard like Anthony Edwards at the helm, top seed in the Western Conference right now, and a defense that is just kicking everybody in the mouth this year. Everybody in the mouth, right? And I mean, again, with the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, most dynamic quarterback in the NBA, both with his arm and his legs, with arguably the best defense in the NFL this year. So and definitely played like it against the Texans last week. I mean, literally did not even give up a single offensive touchdown. Their only touchdown was that punt return. Other than that, they had them boys in check. The entire afternoon. Like I said, it's similar with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like Anthony Edwards is a dynamic dude who should get real all-star consideration. Don't think he'll be a starter, but I do think he's going to end up making the all-star team. Yeah. And they just have a roster built off the philosophy of like our lead guy gets us to the promised land. Our defense keeps us afloat when that guy isn't on the floor. Anthony Edwards, perfect example of this. Yeah. That's the guy. By hook or crook, and Edwards is the guy. But outside of him, our calling card is we lock up on defense. I mean, it seemed pretty A to B to me.
100%. I like that as comparison, especially because they're two like young up-and-coming teams. You have your star being like a young Lamar Jackson. Now with Anthony Edwards, I do like the comparison. For myself, I'm comparing this Ravens team to the 2023 Nuggets in the sense where I feel like the Ravens have been the best team all year, but you've kind of like it's the same like narrative we had last year. You kind of be like, are they the best team? Can Lamar really take them to the promised land? Same thing with Nikola Jokic. But maybe the answer is just plain simple and it's right there in front of you. This Ravens team is just like that, man. That Ravens team is just like that. Lamar, Jokic, former MVPs in their own right. They finally got a healthy roster going into this season. Yeah. Now they just have things finally clicking. Maybe this was the best team. Maybe you want to make the argument for the 49ers or the Chiefs and this and that. By the end of the day, they got the MVP this year, and Lamar Jackson should have been Jokic last year, and they're just like rolling through the competition.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just plain and simple that the Ravens are just that team this year, and I think and it's probably going to be their year to kind of like put things all together. So I have this Ravens giving me the like eerily similar vibes to the 2023 Nuggets.
No, again, TV, I think it's spot on. This is the coolest part about the contrast between past and present for this. By the way, we didn't set this up. Yeah. Just so the listeners know, we didn't set this up on purpose. TV came up with this really unique idea. I asked him, I was like, have you seen this anywhere else? I tried to YouTube it a little bit, see if this was anywhere else. This was off the dome for TV. So we both came into this one blind, and I didn't know he was going to go more so past. I knew for sure I was coming in present. Yeah. This is an interesting dichotomy, but I also think that your comparison, once again, because we have 2020 hindsight with your teams as opposed to my teams are, of course, active. We're watching them as they go along. But from 2020 hindsight with that Denver Nuggets team, I get exactly what you're saying. And it all comes down to, like you mentioned beforehand, because we joked about it on our podcast probably 2 or 3 times throughout that entire Denver Nuggets run of like, yo, have they just been the best team the whole time? And we just didn't want to say anything because like the Phoenix Suns got KD, right? Yeah. Or like the Lakers just always seem like they're in there and hanging around, right? Or the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers. We always find ourselves talking about the teams that have the glitz and the glamour that we're used to keeping our eye on, right? And then we find out that in reality, the Denver Nuggets are like the best team in basketball. And Baltimore has faced a lot of that similar scrutiny throughout this year. Or maybe not scrutiny is not the word, but let's think about all the teams that come first in mind throughout this year, if you watch ESPN on a regular basis, right?
The Chiefs.
That come before the Baltimore Ravens come into conversation. Yeah. Like you said, the Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Philadelphia Eagles for most of the years. Of course, the Cowboys are in the conversation, right? Like there's a bunch of teams that come up first before we say, but the Baltimore Ravens are the best team in football right now, right? And I think the same thing can be said about that Denver Nuggets. Sure, we said the same thing about that Denver Nuggets team. So it's literally like to a T, this idea that we might be watching the best team in football and we just haven't came to that realization yet. And if everybody does, soon it's going to be similar to that Denver Nuggets team that they're just going to pop out and win the chip. And we're just going to have to say, well, dang, all the evidence is there. It's just time to give them their flowers. I feel you. I really like this comparison too.
Yeah, I hope Lamar really gets it. And for the rest of America, and so that we don't have to see it, and for people who don't want to deal with for the Kansas City Chiefs and seeing all that constant hate for the Kansas City Chiefs, people are relying on Lamar Jackson to get this win.
Man, I live here in Baltimore, dude. If they win another chip, Lord,
it's about to be crazy.
The streets will not be safe, TV. It's going to be a lot more early pods out here, my boy.
I love that. I like that. All right, man. Lamar Jackson, probably the MVP going for the season. Who do you have as his NBA player comparison?
TV, I'm glad you led into it just like that because my Lamar Jackson comparison is my boy, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Here's the reality, TV. Here's the reality, TV. Let's paint it out. Same way you did with the 2023 Nuggets. I think this is a perfect 1-to-1. We want to talk about all these other MVP candidates leading the race. But in reality, this will be the guy who slivers through the cracks and bursts out at the end as the guy that I think is going to actually end up winning the dang MVP. Yeah. The same thing, like we talked about it earlier with Lamar Jackson. There's a bunch of names that came up beforehand. Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, like I said, Christian McCaffrey at one point. Like there's a bunch of other guys in terms of the MVP conversation in the NFL that we were having until very recently when Lamar Jackson started going up against some of the best in the AFC and the NFC and put foots on some folks and really started to cement his MVP case for this year. But it took a while for us to get to that point of finally saying like, but yo, I think Lamar is the MVP. The same thing could be said for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this year. Me and you, we're Team Nikola Jokic. We've been like this for about 2 years. We've been lockstep with Nikola Jokic as the best player in basketball since before we started the Hit Your Free Throws podcast. Mm-hmm. Joel Embiid on a per-minute basis, playing like a demigod off 2K26 somewhere. The dude is operating on a different kind of timing, right? Luka Doncic is obviously in the mix. Jason Tatum is the best player on the best team in basketball. There's no way we can sleep on Giannis Antetokounmpo. But what this guy, SGA, is doing, let's be real, man. What he's doing with this Oklahoma City Thunder team is surreal with the way that they are operating, the fact that they're one of the top teams in the Western Conference, punching above their weight. And they're a team that a lot of people thought, and I'll probably end up getting to this a little bit deeper when we actually talk about a different team, but they're a team that a lot of people thought was a year away from where we're seeing them as right now. And SGA has a lot to do with that in terms of pushing them ahead and making them something much better than what a lot of us viewed them as. The Baltimore Ravens coming into this year, with the way the Bengals looked a year ago, we viewed them as probably like the second best team in the conference. Obviously, the Browns, looked relatively okay. That defense is elite. Obviously they didn't look too elite against the Texans, but that team was elite. That defense was elite all year. The Pittsburgh Steelers don't know how to have a losing record, right? But we always view the Baltimore Ravens as being a legitimate powerhouse in the AFC East, right? Or excuse me, the AFC North. So, like I said, I think Lamar Jackson in comparison to SGA, I think is almost 1-to-1, because I think at the end of the day, we're going to talk about a bunch of other guys in MVP for a majority of the year. But I think when all is said is done, this is the guy. This is the guy who's going to host the trophy. I think that's what it's going to be.
I respect that. I respect that pick, and I love that the two, especially them at that age, like the two young guy comparisons, like looking to win their first MVP, or at least with Lamar's second MVP. I like that choice. For myself, I'm going with Giannis Antetokounmpo right before he won the championship, and my argument for that is that people have always talked about Giannis and Lamar in a way that, is this guy a quarterback? Is he like in the legit, like one of the best quarterbacks in the league? You feel like a lot of his game comes from his legs. A lot of Giannis' game comes from his athleticism. Is he like actually basketball skilled? Similar to the quarterback throwing ability and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, buckets are buckets, results are results, wins are wins.
Right.
And that's what Giannis back then, right before he won his championship, and what Lamar is trying to do right now. Both are probably going to end up being two-time MVPs by the end of this year, and they're both. And Lamar has set on the championships, as did Giannis did in that 2021 run. So I think when it comes to both of these guys are freak athletes. These guys are kind of defying the expectations of what the position asks of them to do, what the sport asks of them to do, to be completely honest, and they're being just as effective, still being one of the best players in the league, and now they're going to have a championship to back up their production.
I think that's, again, a really spot on comparison when you talk about the ideal of walking in to big time stakes with the MVP already in your back pocket. But the question still is, can you take that style and make it translate to the biggest stage in the NFL or in the NBA? And for Giannis, he broke past that wall and was able to win the championship in a way that we all viewed once upon a time as unsustainable, right? Yeah. And Lamar Jackson is working within a similar realm, because the mobile quarterback is on the rise, right? Yeah. Obviously in the NFL. The same way that I think that the athletic ball handling big man is something that has definitely gained steam in the NBA. But the idea always comes down to, but to win the game, can you make the big throw? Can you make that good decision on 3rd and 9 to be able to move the sticks in the closing 2 minutes to keep a drive alive, right? And the same thing goes in the NBA. Like, when it comes crunch time, are you able to draw contact and get to the line at a high rate to be able to finish the game out, putting a team in the bonus and putting pressure on them? Are you able to stretch the floor and hit a big three, or be able to force the defense to collapse on you, where you're able to hit a shooter at the right time to be able to make the right basketball play to put your team over the top in the biggest moments? These two guys have done it the most unconventional way their sports know how.
Yeah.
And now, similar like you said with Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's Lamar Jackson's turn to take that style, uplift it in a way that now at the highest level, he can show that it can get the job done. I like that one too, because the unconventional play style of these two guys not only makes this whole thing unique, but it also kind of defines like the change in the game to an extent. Like exactly. Giannis winning the championship made us view his style of play differently, right? Maybe we don't view it as long, like the longevity of it the same. That's one of those things where I think we may still view the longevity of the play style the same in terms of it being something that might not progress for a long time, but it's something that in this stage of his career, he's going to always be able to play for a championship. I think that the same thing can be said for Lamar Jackson right now.
100%. Hopefully he has that same Giannis narrative and he's able to pull through and finally, silence all the people who thought that he couldn't win a Super Bowl. Hopefully he could do that this year.
Yeah.
Moving on to NBA, everyone's NFL darlings this season, the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. Jay, who was your NBA comparison for the Detroit Lions?
First of all, shout out to the Detroit Lions for still being in the mix, man. Making history like a mug. It's insane. Really repping the area in a very respectable way, considering the fact that the Detroit Pistons freaking suck. So shout out to the Lions, man. But my NBA comparison to the Detroit Lions, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. It was the Oklahoma City Thunder of this year. Seems as though they came into the year with all the pieces that have the structure of a team that could be a postseason like contender, right? Not necessarily maybe make a deep run, but a team that could make the postseason, but seemed as though they were still about a year away from reaching what it is they wanted to be, right? This is a team that when they brought in Dan Campbell, like, yo, this is going to be a legitimate rebuild. This is going to take a couple of years. We are going to take our time. They built in the trenches. They put themselves in a really good place, building up their offensive line around Jared Goff. They have legitimate weapons. Amon-Ra has been like elite this year, by the way. And then Hutchinson on the defensive line. Like they've really built out a really strong roster for themselves. Talking about the Detroit Lions. But this is a team that still feel like they were a year away from what we're looking at right now. And I still feel like many people didn't view them as like they're going to be in the NFC title game a year from now. So they're ahead of schedule. This is what brings me to the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder felt like a team that was still like a year away, right? They need to acclimate their second year player / first time NBA rookie Chet Holmgren into the roster. Jalen Williams is on his is in his second year. SGA is coming off of his first real season as an MVP caliber player. They still view themselves as a team. Listen to Sam Presti every single time he goes into a preseason introductory press conference, right? He continues to push this idea of taking it slow and steady, building up the blocks, getting themselves to the point that they want to get to, but taking the long route, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet here they are. One of the top teams in the Western Conference, way ahead of schedule with an MVP candidate, a Rookie of the Year candidate, a Most Improved Player candidate, a Coach of the Year candidate.
Yeah.
And for all we know, if they get the right matchup, we might see the Oklahoma City Thunder playing in the second round of the Western Conference playoffs this year.
Yeah.
This season. So, again, the Detroit Lions, the Oklahoma City Thunder, two teams that made it clear to their fan bases years ago, we're playing the long game, and find themselves years later ahead of the curve, playing really good football, really good basketball. And regardless of what happens this season, it's considered a net positive because they are much further ahead than we could have ever projected. I think that's huge.
Again, another young team who's trying to really make some noise here. The Detroit Lions, I mean, they ended up with the second seed in the NFC, so they really were ahead of schedule. and they are now one win away from the Super Bowl, which is crazy to say next to a Detroit Lions, next to the name of the Detroit Lions, 100%. I'm comparing them to the 2021 Suns, and I feel like, and I think that in that sort of comparison, it's like both these teams forever since the last time they made to the playoffs. Now all of a sudden, not only did they make the playoffs, but they're making like legitimate noise. The Suns made all the way to the finals in their first year in the playoffs in like 14 years or something.
Yeah.
And in a sense, with Chris Paul and I guess Jared Goff, both these guys were successful in other places, but they didn't know if this guy was going to be able to lead, like to be a key contributor, one of the top players when it came to a new system. LA Rams team was stacked when they won with Jared Goff. It was like, he was carried by the rest of the roster. It's different here with the Detroit Lions, and he actually had to play some elite football to get to this point. Chris Paul at his old age had to still be one of like the top 6-7 point guards in the league to be able to lead that Phoenix Suns all the way to the NBA Finals, to the point where they had this man in like top 5 MVP voting, even though he was averaging 17 and 10. Like, Jared Goff is really that type of guy. He came in here, was shunned out by the Rams. Same thing with Chris Paul in terms of the Clippers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now they're trying to revive themselves in this one place where there's the Suns, whether it's the Lions here, and they're doing a really good job in there. Probably they're a few steps away from getting all the way to the very end with their situations.
I think the historical context is probably the best part of this comparison. The idea that these two teams hadn't seen the postseason in a really, really long time and are not wasting the opportunity, right? The Phoenix Suns, like you mentioned beforehand, made it all the way to the championship game, or the championship series, excuse me. The Detroit Lions have a real chance to go to the Super Bowl this year. And it's one of those things where breaking the playoff drought already means a lot, but then to really take advantage of the opportunity you now have earned, it means that much more, because it's not like we're just glad to be here. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of teams, right, that operate with that ideology of like, especially if you listen to certain owners, man, oh my gosh, where they almost make it sound like the playoff checks hitting different is kind of like their main priority. That's not what it is for a real NFL or a real NBA fan. It's not the idea of we're just happy to be here. Don't get me wrong. Listen, if you've been on a significant drought like those two, like this Detroit Lions team, like that Phoenix Suns team, like the Sacramento Kings from last year, for example, you definitely are excited to just see postseason basketball or postseason football again. But you still definitely want to see the most out of your team in the opportunity that they made. We saw the Phoenix Suns go all the way to the chip. We've seen the Detroit Lions now push themselves to the NFC Championship game. We saw the Sacramento Kings push the Golden State Warriors last year, right? These are all things that you really can enjoy, because we know that, dude, look, I know that a lot of teams get to make the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of teams that don't get to make it as often. So when you get to see them in that circumstance, it's a different energy, right? Because there's a different vibe. There's a different situation. They're playing with different stakes than the teams that have to act like they've been there because they've been there so often. So I think that's dope.
Yeah, 100%. Now moving on to Jared Goff, the player himself. Who do you have as his NBA comparison?
So Jared Goff, you made a lot of associations with Chris Paul that I think I'm just going to end up regurgitating with the player I chose, which is this year's James Harden. On a new team, written off a bit, coming off of like how things went the prior season, or arguably the last couple of seasons. Struggled a bit in the beginning, but caught fire as of late, and is quietly revitalizing a team that desperately needs it and really has a bright future ahead of them. When you look at Jared Goff coming off of the, being exiled essentially from the LA Rams, we kind of wondered like what the future of Jared Goff was. And it felt like sending him to Detroit was the version of like kicking him to Siberia, right? Like we just know that the Detroit Lions were in a rebuilding situation. We understood that like Jared Goff would be going from having a bunch of weapons around him to like needing to kind of really build things out, right?
Yeah.
And we weren't sure, like you mentioned earlier on, we weren't sure like how he was going to transition, going from having all of these weapons to having to really be the guy. Interesting enough, James Harden is actually the antithesis of this. Remember, James Harden even came into this season as a member of the LA Clippers saying, I am the system, right?
Yeah.
But he has slowly but surely adjusted his game in a way where, yes, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Russell Westbrook all have to sacrifice in a way. But the ability for James Harden to change his game, to play in this more team-oriented concept is what has unlocked them, right? The same way Jared Goff being able to step up in his circumstances being inverted has been able to really unlock what the Detroit Lions have going right now. So although James Harden probably has a lot more baggage overall than Jared Goff because of the overall postseason lack of success and things of that nature, Jared Goff is still a top 2 NFL pick, right? Yeah. And they're viewed differently when they do not succeed.
Yeah.
So when he was sent to the NFL's version of Siberia, many viewed that was going to be the slow demise of his career. The same way many of us viewed that, like, after Philadelphia for James Harden, he might be cooked. But here he is putting himself back in position for us to view him again as one of the top players in the NBA. Maybe not the best, maybe not top 10, not top, top 12 like we once viewed him, but still easily one of the best players in the NBA. I think Goff is making a real argument for himself that, like, yo, I was taking top 2 for a reason.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I don't think that Goff has maybe reached the levels individually that James Harden has, especially being like at an MVP consistently at a top 3 level. But in terms of being like moved saying that he's, him being looked at as a problem and then still succeeding nonetheless, I do like that comparison with James Harden. For myself, I'm going with Kyle Lowry. And the reason I go with Kyle Lowry is because you're never going to see Jared Goff viewed as maybe at the border as a top 10 quarterback. Mm-hmm. He'll always be like in that mix between maybe 9 to 14, maybe 15. You'll always have Jared Goff in that mix just because he'll always produce and he's always like, he's not going to make too many mistakes. Kyle Lowry is kind of the same thing. He's always been a good point guard. He's a freaking 5-time All-Star. But he was never like a top 5 point guard in the league because that position is just way too deep. There's too many more dynamic, electric guys in the league. When Kyle Lowry's doing a lot of the basic stuff. Same thing with Jared Goff. It's nothing really about his game is like fancy or anything. He doesn't run as fast as Lamar. He doesn't have the arm of Patrick Mahomes, but he gets the job done. And you're comfortable with him and Kyle Lowry as your starting point guard / quarterback on a championship team, whether it's the Toronto Raptors, whether it was or the last couple of seasons with the Miami Heat. You're just comfortable with him as a starting point guard for the team because you know they're not going to make mistakes and you know they're going to do the right thing. Jared Goff, I don't think will reach the top 5 quarterback ceiling that maybe someone like a James Harden what did at his position, but he'll always be solid enough where you have to having him on your roster will be enough, or he'll do the right enough of the right things to put you in a position to win.
I really like that one too, because I think that at the end of the day, the main thing is just he's gonna do what he does regardless of if you view him as top 5 or middle of the pack. It doesn't matter what your viewership of him is. At the end of the day, he's gonna play productive football or basketball, and he's gonna put your team in position to be able to win if the things around him also, play up to snuff. That Toronto Raptors team, you lived it. They were one player away, but that team was good the whole time, right? LeBronto became a thing because they were so consistent at being able to make the postseason, right? LeBronto only became a thing because they were always at the party for most of that time frame. The same thing, we'll have to see, obviously, because this Jared Goff era has taken its course. But this could be the start of something that could become relatively perennial for the Detroit Lions, and it's because of the fact that we know that we're learning that Jared Goff is good enough. I felt like that was the question we weren't sure about on his exit from the LA Rams. And I think we're starting to get an understanding of that. Like, Jared Goff is good enough. Yes, he needs things around him. Yes, there's a certain level of foundation you need built. But like, if you have the foundation, he's the don't F it up quarterback, but with a higher ceiling than that. Yeah. And I think Kyle Lowry's career kind of plays into that relatively well too.
Yeah, 100%. Last but not least, let's go through this quickly. The 49ers. NBA comparison, and of course we're gonna have to compare Brock Purdy.
So I'm gonna do this one as a twofer. I'm gonna do this one as a twofer because I felt like I couldn't come up with anything separated, and this felt like stupid easy to me. Yeah. Brock Purdy is Derek White, and the 49ers are the Boston Celtics to me. Yeah. And this is how I put it. For Brock Purdy in comparison to Derek White, average to above average player who plays a large role and does get a lot of love, because look, they're calling Brock Purdy a lot of things. I don't know if you've heard it, but like he's getting like Montana comparisons and stuff. It's getting kind of bonkers. Yeah. But like average to above average player who plays a large role, does get a lot of love, but is supplemented with a ton of weapons. I don't even think I need to explain that to you, but like elite defense, Brandon Ayuk, obviously Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuels, like he's literally playing like with house money, right? Like Brock Purdy, he's good. He was getting MVP conversation, which I think is insane, but like he was getting real MVP conversation earlier this year while being surrounded by that kind of talent offensively. Nick Bosa and guys like that on the defensive end, like insane roster construction for the 49ers. And here Brock Purdy is getting all the love because he's the quarterback of it all. Yeah. Derek White plays with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, and we're talking about Derek White for All-Star. Like we're talking about, and don't get me wrong, Derek White is important, but that goes to show you, A, probably how low people are on the Eastern Conference, but B, the dude is good, but the surrounding talent around him is magnifying our viewership of them. And then, like I said, with the Celtics compared to the 49ers, they have literally everything. The question is, can they close the deal? Brock Purdy has every weapon in the books to pass the ball to, and Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. The defense is elite. Elite. The same thing can be said for the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics are one of only like 3 teams in the NBA that are top 5 in offense and defense. They have arguably 2-3 guys that we're making 4 guys that we're making all-star considerations for. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Kristaps Porzingis, right? The question now, especially when you throw Drew Holiday in the mix of that, the question now is, can you get the job done? Like, can you get it done? This team has been good all season long, right? Yeah. This team clearly has the roster construction to punch on anybody they want to. Are you gonna finish the job? And we've been saying that about the Celtics for a while, but this is the most OP roster the Celtics have ever walked into a season with. So the question now is like, yo, you got everything. Yeah. What's left to do besides go ahead and punch your ticket and get this chip? The same thing I think is for the 49ers. I don't think don't get me wrong. I think they'll have this roster for at least another season or two. They're in a special place. I didn't even mention George Kittle for this team, which is insane. Yeah. But the question still lies, like, if you can't get it done this year, then when? Yeah. You know? That was literally my team. Just any Celtics team from the last like 5 years. Celtics team from the last 5 years. Good call. And I guess this season as well, like, especially it's like magnified in that way. So I guess if you really want to pick one Celtics team, it would have to be this season. Mm-hmm. But for me, like Brock Purdy, feel like I wouldn't go as low as Derek White per se, but I do love it. I do love that comparison, and I honestly thought of that first because that even like makes it a lot better, especially with the Celtics comparison. But along the same breath, I give him to like Chris Middleton during like the during the Bucks championship run, and this is like what I mean by that in the sense where because Chris Middleton covered up for a lot of the Giannis flaws, they're trying to make Chris Middleton more than he actually was. Same thing with Brock Purdy, where it's like, look, he does enough. He has the pieces around him, but he benefits a lot from the players around him. Chris Middleton
is only so good those last few years because he has freaking Giannis on his team, creating all the space like on the perimeter.
Yeah.
Same thing with Brock Purdy. But some people were going to the point, like you said, Brock Purdy for MVP. Some people, like, I don't know who it was, but they said that like Chris Milton should be the Batman and
Kendrick Perkins.
Perkins, and Giannis should be the Robin. I'm like, no. We are not going to that point with Brock Purdy or with Chris Milton. They're good. They're good. And I think people don't give Brock Purdy enough credit. The same thing with Chris Milton in that sense. But don't overdo it. Don't overblow it. We know what players they are. We know who Chris Milton is. We know what Brock Purdy is. They'll put up numbers. They'll do the right things. But don't push them into a class of talent that they're not a part of.
Yeah.
They're good. And they're probably, and Brock Purdy in the situation he's at, he's probably going to be in multiple Pro Bowls. But I don't see him as ever going to be like a top like 5 player at his position, top 5 player in the league. And it's the same thing with Chris Milton. I don't think he'll ever be like in that like sort of realm like as like a top 5 guy in his position.
I feel you. Like Brock Purdy does feel like one of the weirdest MVPs we'd ever have.
Yeah.
Like in NFL history. The same way as like comparing the roles of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton. I think we ended up talking about this on your podcast forever ago.
Yeah.
But like the concept of viewing Chris Middleton as the Batman on the team, we understand that like in the closing moments back on that team, that him as a ball handler was significant because what he's able to do off the dribble and pick and roll and things like that.
Because they had no one else to do it.
Exactly. Circumstantially speaking, yes, Giannis Antetokounmpo does not necessarily have that quote unquote bag, which does magnify Chris Middleton. But we know that half the reason Chris Middleton is able to operate in that way is because Giannis Antetokounmpo garners so much attention, right? But like you mentioned with that championship team, Giannis Antetokounmpo, MVP caliber season. We were talking about Bobby Portis as a 6th man of the year candidate. Let's not forget that during that season. Drew Holiday, still within the class now, but especially during that time frame, in the class of being viewed as the best, not one of the best, the best point guard defender in the NBA, right? So Chris Middleton essentially is like, he's essentially like the Harrison Barnes of those Golden State Warriors teams that won the championship.
Okay, but he's
like,
on a whole another level.
He's way more. No, listen. He's way more qualified. But when you go down the list of who of importance, or or you go down the list of like what the role they play is, like I'm not saying Bobby Portis is more important than Chris Middleton, right? But when you look at the viewership of what everything was going on with that team, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis playing at the level he was playing with, Giannis, obviously Drew Holiday as well. Like Chris Middleton, almost as the cherry on top, but an overqualified cherry on top. Yes. Brock Purdy is the cherry on top of a very stacked 49ers team, but he's above average, which gives them an even better chance because he's playing at a level that, that an average quarterback could get them to the second round of the run if they don't get home field advantage. Brock Purdy is what gets them home field advantage. Chris Middleton not being on the roster, they're probably a second round exit team, the Milwaukee Bucks that year. Chris Middleton on that roster elevates them into Eastern Conference champions playing for a title.
Yeah.
So I think that's Chris Middleton is probably more respectful of a comparison than Derek White, which is hilarious. Yeah. But of course, I was using the current. But you can say Chris Middleton now is similar. I just think Chris Middleton's like a little bit more like a shell of himself this season, which is why I didn't want to use him for this year.
That's fair. But let us know down below. Firstly, if you guys are watching the games this weekend, who you have winning, and also who are your NBA comparisons for the teams and also the quarterbacks.
TV, can I interject real quick? I want to let the listeners know. First of all, shout out to TV because I had to explain this at the beginning of the segment, but I also want to reiterate it. Yeah. This is like a really unique topic. TV really had me in my bag. Like I was at work preparing for this because of like how interesting this topic was. Yeah. But also, can you guys give us a little credit that we know a little NFL football? I know look, man, I know we're NBA guys. Don't sleep, but. Yeah. At the same time, hey man, I felt like we did our thing with the NFL conversation. This was a unique way for us to give you guys a little bit of the behind the scenes. We know a little NFL football on top of this hoops. We know a little bit.
Don't doubt us, man. Don't freaking doubt us. We watch sports. We watch
Shout out
sports.
TV, man. Shout out TV, man.
Hey, yeah, but let us know down below NBA comparisons for the teams and also the quarterbacks for these conference championship teams.
Mm.
This episode's going long, but man, there was a lot to talk about. But it was some damn good conversation. But we're not gonna end it off here. We have the draft, we have the quiz going on, and now we've gone to the meat and potatoes. One of the greatest draft classes of all time, that 2003 NBA draft class. We've done 2000 all the way to 2002. We are now in part 4, 2003. We said that this is probably gonna be one of the better drafts, but then me and Jay looked at it a little bit further and was like, after the first 4 or 5 picks, it's kind of tough. How do you feel about this draft, Jay?
Hey, you said it, buddy. the first couple of picks, we got them down pat. It's going to be a roster construction thing. We're going to see how it goes. But after the first couple of picks, we're going to have to start getting a little creative. But there's some names on here. It's definitely some names on here.
There's definitely some names. And you know how these drafts go. Jay gets the first pick, I get the next 2, and we continue on serpentine style. So, Jay, we all know where you're going, number 1. Let's just get it over with. Who do you have with your number 1 overall pick in the 2003 draft?
Come on, man. It's the 03 NBA draft. I'm going with my boy LeBron James at the top. He might not be the best player in the world to me, but he's definitely the best player in this draft class, and it's by a mile. I don't care.
And that's saying a lot, too. With the amount of great players in this draft, LeBron is still the best player by a mile. That is saying a lot for how great he's been over the last 20 years. I told you, Jay, this draft is going to go a certain way, these first 4 picks, and I'm not going anything pretty. I'm not doing anything anything out of the ordinary. I'm just doing this straight up. I'm going Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony. I'm not gonna overthink this. Give me 2 bona fide Hall of Famers here. Just fantastic players in their prime. MVP candidates in their prime. I'm gonna take those 2. Those are the easy 2 choices.
Yeah, I like those. And then when you look at the circumstances, definitely probably the most talented players left on the board. But I'm gonna get the guy who obviously is gonna round out the top 4. I'm gonna go ahead and grab Chris Bosh here. I'm putting him at my 5. We're gonna go ahead and get him at the stretch 5 position early on. This is something that he was able to thrive in with Miami. But TV, as a Toronto Raptor, you know he was a demon. We already know that.
Yes, of course.
So no, don't sleep on that. And then beyond that, the other pick I have to go with, I don't think I'm going to regret this. And I say this because I'm a homer, so it is what it is. But I'm going to go ahead and get my boy Captain Kirk right here, man. I'm going to go ahead and get my boy Kirk Heinrich right here, man.
Yeah, if you were going to choose him, I was going to choose him within my next 2 picks. So I like that choice. If you didn't get Kirk Heinrich, I would be very surprised. So Kirk Heinrich and Chris Bosh added to your team. I'm going to round up my front court here with my next 2, just because we have enough scoring. We have some ball handling. Now we just need some guys to go down the low post and also grab us some rebounds. Former All-Stars, well, actually, I don't think David West is an All-Star, but he's going to be my next pick. I'm going to go with David West. And then afterwards, I'm going to go with the caveman himself, Chris Kaman, to run my center position.
Nice. All right, man. That's okay. So there's one guy I know I'm going to get, and the other guy is just questionable. The one guy I know I'm for sure going to – oh, actually, you know what? I know what I'm going to do. Got to get my boy Leandro Barbosa. I'm going to put him at the 2. And then I'm going to put LeBron James at the 3. And at the 4, I'm going to have another dynamic passer to help keep all of this together. Give me the guy who played point guard / shooting guard his first 2 seasons. Let me get Boris Diaw at the 4, man.
Boris Diaw, love that selection. Look, freaking Swiss Army knife could do a little bit of everything, Crazy. And that's why he stuck with the Spurs for such a long time. Boris Diaw is a great pickup over there. For my final pick, I just realized my team isn't great defensively. D-Wade was a menace on defense in his prime, though. Don't sleep. But I'm going to have to go here. You know what? If we're going to commit to offense, we're going to commit to offense. I'm moving Dwayne Wade to my point guard position. That's where he's going to start. And at the 2, I'm going to get one of the best shooters of all time. Mr. Traded for a fax machine. Give me Kyle Korver to round out my roster.
TV. This, I'm not gonna lie. If you double back, the guard spot is pretty okay in this draft.
A lot of decent role players, I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go down, obviously there's Mo Williams is later on here. Steve Blake is in the mix. You took Kyle Korver. I thought that was pretty dope. James Jones is here. Like, there's
Luke
a couple
Ridnour,
of
solid
guys.
player. Luke Ridnour, solid player. You had Steve
one.
Blake, longtime point guard in this league. So yeah, there's a lot of like solid role players. It's just that like the talent drop off after the first four is kind of tough.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, Jay, going through your team, the 2003 draft, who do you got lining up for you?
So for the 2003 draft, my starting five is Kirk Heinrich at the 1, Leandro Barbosa at the 2, LeBron James at the 3, Boris Diaw at the 4, and Chris Bosh at the 5.
I like it. And I feel like this is like a LeBron constructed team. You know what I mean? This is like a type of team that you would want to build around LeBron. So
Yeah.
I do like that lineup together. For myself, I have Dwayne Wade starting at the 1. I got the sharpshooter Kyle Korver at the 2. Don't sleep, former NBA All-Star. Carmelo Anthony at the 3, David West at the 4, and we got Chris Kaman at the 5. How you feeling about your team, Jay?
I feel good, man. I mean, obviously, we were a little nervous about this draft after the top picks, but I mean, don't sleep. Like you said beforehand, we still were able to get some really good talent, and there was a couple of guys that like we didn't pick that still were relatively good. And I mean, when you look through the listing here, like there was still a handful of interesting ones. Like Carlos Delfino had a really decent career in the NBA. I'm pretty sure
Nick Collison, Mikal Petras.
Mikal Petras was actually one of the guys I originally was thinking about drafting. Nick Collison. I think Kendrick Perkins is in this draft as well. Like, there's a handful of interesting pickups that we could have still had. So I think we were able to get some pretty good talent, but there were still some good guys on the board.
Yeah. And also shout out one more person I wanted to do, Josh Howard. He actually had some like pretty damn good seasons as a member of the Dallas Mavericks back in the day, so he deserves some love as well. Let us know down below which team was drafted better between me and Jay's. Let us know down below. Jay, moving on to the NBA quiz, and I let you know beforehand we are bringing back a classic segment, and how do I even name this? It's the back and forth game where me and Jay are given a team, a topic, and we have to try and go back and forth and try to name players as much as possible until one player messes up. We have a bogey player, and Jay, I told you before, I'm not going to give you the team, but I'm going to give it to you right now. I mentioned earlier on that Doc Rivers won Coach of the Year with the Orlando Magic, and he like blew a 3-1 lead with them as well in the first round. So we are going to be trying to name players from Orlando Magic franchise history here. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds to come up with a bogey player for the Orlando Magic, and we're going to go back and forth try to see who can name more Orlando Magic players.
All right, man. Okay, got you.
Ooh, this is a tough one to kind of.
I got it.
You know what? I got it. I got mine. You ready? All right.
Yes, sir.
You go first, and let's try to go back and forth.
All right. First player for Orlando, Dwight Howard.
Okay. Evan Fournier.
JJ Redick.
DJ Augustine.
Ito Turkoglu.
Nikola Vucevic.
Quentin Richardson.
Your boy, Jonathan Isaac.
My boy, Paulo Banchero.
Tracy McGrady.
Dennis Scott.
Oh, I'm scared. Grant Hill.
Penny Hardaway.
That was Pat Garrity.
Oh my gosh. The heck? Mr. Can't Hit Free Throws, Nick Anderson.
Ooh, that's a tough one right there.
Yeah.
Please. Jameer Nelson.
Teammate of Jameer Nelson as well, Rashard Lewis.
Bang!
Get.
Rashard Lewis is on the board here. Oh, we've returned to the series. and I had to put on Rashard Lewis for that team. Who's the guy you put down for me?
Mine was Tobias Harris.
Tobias Harris. Honestly, if I started going up the years, I probably would have got there eventually. I was gonna say Jalen Suggs next, so I was safe. I was gonna say Jalen Suggs.
I went with somebody who I felt like was further up the totem pole because I feel like we always name the obscure guys first unless we just really don't know. So I figured like if I pick somebody random like him or Victor Oladipo, I would have like had a decent chance.
No, that was a good one. I picked Rashard Lewis just because he was prominent enough to be remembered on those Orlando Magic teams, but he's not like the first person you think of. So you might go like a little bit deeper and go for him. So yeah, I got Rashard Lewis on the board. We're gonna throw in this series every once in a while back in here. So let us know down below if you haven't done your team yet, and we'll end up doing that. Jay, we finally reached the end of this episode. Thank you guys for watching. What do you tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Man, we gave you guys a longer episode. I didn't sell. I promise I did not sell on this quiz in terms of it going by so fast. But we gave you guys a longer episode, a unique episode. I'm gonna do this again, and I don't want this to fall on deaf ears. Like again, shout out to TV. This was a very unique topic that we had set up on the docket as the main meat and potatoes of the podcast. The NFL to NBA comparisons, past and present. It gave a really different dynamic to our analyzation of these teams, but I hope you guys, I hope you guys take away from this. We do watch more than NBA basketball. Yeah. Like we are sports fans at the end of the day, number one. Mm-hmm. But number two, I hope that this unique exercise was also a good way to give you guys a better understanding of some of the NBA teams that we talked about. Not just the present ones that I talked about, but even being able to contextualize some of the things that we saw throughout those seasons with those past teams that TV brought up. Like, I think that this was a really strong exercise to give us a better understanding of some of the better teams that we've seen across NBA history and comparing them to a really unique NFL season where there's a lot of different storylines. You don't see Brock Purdy's making NFC championships. You don't see the Detroit Lions making history in this way. You don't view a Lamar Jackson who already has an MVP that still has a chip on his shoulder. Patrick Mahomes is probably the only steady hand here. And like I said during my breakdown, Patrick Mahomes is a guy who has not been talked about much this season because of the fact that he hasn't been as spectacular as we've seen him in years past. And we were able to coexist that with some of the things that we've seen across NBA history, whether it be in the past or right now. And it was really an interesting deep dive. That all being said, this is what we say when me and TV tell you that we're coming with some unique stuff every single time we hop on the mic. So if you are not already subscribed to the podcast and you're just seeing this through the clips, hit the subscribe button, bro. We're coming with you. We're coming to you with something different every single week. We're giving you something unique every single time we talk about basketball.
100%. And of course, we have a lot more episodes coming up soon. Next week, we got the NBA All-Star reserves we have to choose. The starters are being announced tonight as of the release of this. Which is going to be on Thursday. So the starters are going to be announced tonight, and we're going to be making our reserve picks next week. So be on the lookout for that. And we just have a lot more NBA content coming around. The NBA trade deadline, the playoffs, which are in just a couple months away. Just a lot of other stuff. And of course, check out this pod, YouTube, any of the podcast networks, all that good stuff. But of course, the daily content, man, the TikToks, the Instagrams. That's where you're going to find us at our peak form. Do you think this content is great? Then we have some great short form there as well, and you're going to be able to check that out at Hit Your Free Throws. So yeah, thank you guys for all your support. Thank you guys for watching. Check out all those links down below again for myself and Jay, and where you can find the rest of the Hit Your Free Throws pod. But again, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a fantastic day. Take it easy, guys. Peace.